Hi, today I am going to do two bookish videos. The first one that I'm filming is my monthly wrap up for September, and then you'll see my video for my last week of reading. So let's get to it. Now, usually when I do a monthly wrap up, I incorporate the book covers as screenshots, but we're going to try something different this month, and if it works, it's the way I will do it every month. So let's go to the beginning of the month. Okay. Now, technically speaking, September had 5 weeks. That would be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay, so my plan, this video today is pretty much going to incorporate from here, which is basically, I think it was the 29th, even though, so the 29th and the 30th and the 31st of August were in that first week. So we'll touch on those, but we won't elaborate on those. So most months have 4 weeks, but for September, what you see here is a full month of reading. And I wanted to show you that. So we're going to just jump into it. I hate the shadows, but I'm an early bird, and that's what you get when you use this kind of lighting. I'm going to turn on another light to see if it will help to decrease the shadows. Let's see if that helps. Okay, so the last 2 days of August, I said the Sunday and Monday. Let me see something really quickly. Okay, my planners begin on Monday, so forgive me for talking about Sunday, because this, you see, this monthly calendar starts on Sunday, but the weekly calendar starts on Monday. So Monday and Tuesday, which were the last 2 days of August, I read the Enola Holmes series, which was 7 books, and I read the whole series in 2 days. Yes, I binge read those books in 2 days. So I said I was going to touch on those, but I wasn't going to elaborate on those. And what I'm doing in this particular video, which is going to be the first time I try it, is I want to see how this video comes across when I use the book covers that I have printed with my Canon Selphy printer. So there you have it, the last 2 days of of August. Now, at the beginning of September, we had a diamond painting weekend, which went from, it was a holiday weekend, so it went from Friday to Monday. So therefore, I didn't get a lot read during that holiday weekend. And that doesn't excuse why I didn't get anything read for Wednesday, but I think I was working on something on Wednesday, so nothing got read Wednesday, which was the 1st. Then when we got to Thursday, the 2nd, I did read The Matchmaker's Lonely Heart by Nancy Campbell Allen. And I'm going to bring it down just a little bit more. Hopefully you can read that. And it was a 336-page book. And it was basically a young woman worked with her aunt and her 2 cousins at like a little newspaper. And they wrote letters to people that were looking to fulfill their love lives. Well, she happened to find someone herself, and then the story shifts to her finding her happily ever after. I've got to give you a summary. We'll give you the summary at the end, okay? So, for Friday, that was Thursday. Here, Friday through Sunday, going into Monday, is when we had the diamond painting weekend. But I still got up and read books in the morning and then before I went to bed that night, even though Sunday, but we'll get to that in a minute. So, Friday I read Bring Her Home by S.A. Dunphy. This was a police procedural, and I'm not sure, I need to find my iPad, where it landed in the series, so we're just going to grab my iPad. I just realized that there's something else I could do in this video, so bear with me. It will only take me a second to find what I'm looking for, because I think based on some of the questions that I have gotten from people that have watched some of my book review videos, you'd like to know A, where a book lies in the series, and B, whether or not the book will work as a standalone. So I'm just bringing up my books on Goodreads. That's what I'm doing. And we're going to go to July through September. Okay. And then we're going to go down to Dunphy. So we need to go to September 1st. We're getting there. Give me a second. So I just want to tell you where things lie. Okay, so there we have Bring Her Home. So Bring Her Home is the first book in a new series called Boyle and Keneally. Okay, it's Irish. Keneally. No. Keneally. I'm trying to pronounce it the Irish way and I'm failing greatly. Boyle and Keneally #1. We're just going to pronounce it the American way. Here is two detectives in, like I said, in Ireland who are working on a case, and this is their first time working together. And it's she's a criminal behaviorist, Jessie Boyle, and he's a detective, and they're working together. That's the first book in a new series. And I'm glad that I read this one because I love when I get on the ground floor of a new series. So I just want to tell you about that. Then I read The Girl Who Survived by, we're going to put this in picture format. There we go. Just changing the format. It would just make it easy for me to pop one if I need to. So The Girl Who Survived by Ellie Midwood is maybe my 5th or 6th book by her. Now, Ellie Midwood was first self-published, but now she's with Bookouture. And let me tell you, when I get a title by Ellie Midwood, I don't even read the summary. When I get offered a blog tour or a book comes up, I'm going to read it. So notice here it says this book was previously published as No Woman's Land, and like I said, she was previously self-published, but now she's published with Bookouture. So her first couple of books with Bookouture were previously published books, and this is Women in the Holocaust #2. Now I read, I think at the end of September I read another Ellie Midwood book, but it's now a new book. But this is a previously published book. And this is a girl who lived in the, she was living in Germany as a normal, healthy, semi-affluent teenager who ended up in the Minsk ghetto because of the German occupation when Hitler was about to, when the World War II was about to take place. And that's where she ends up. But what makes this story interesting is she, as you can see, she meets Wilhelm, who is an SS guard, and they fall in love. And so it's a forbidden love story because she's a young German girl and he's a guard for Hitler, but yet she's now living in the ghetto as a prisoner. So how does their story work out? Excellent 5-star book. It was 277 pages. If I didn't mention before, Bring Her Home was 307 pages or 307 pages. Then I moved on to a series of books that I got the latest book for review, so I went back and grabbed all of the previous books. And this is by Joanna Schaffhausen, and it's the Ellery Hathaway series. So at the end of the last week of August, I did read one of them. I'm not sure where it is, but I did read one of, Vanishing Season. Okay, I did read that. That looks like I read it on the 29th of August. So as I moved into September, I picked up the rest of the books in the series. That was No Mercy and All the Best Lies, which I read Saturday the 4th. This was book 2. I don't know why that says that was book 4. It should have been book 3, but we'll figure that out in a minute. So let's find out why I wrote book 4. I think I just made my own mistake. Yeah. That's book 3. That's a boo-boo on my part. So I read No Mercy, All the Best Lies, and then I moved on to Every Waking Hour. And then I read another book, but I'll tell you about that in a second. And then I read the last one, Last Seen Alive. So that's it for that series. As a matter of fact, she started a new series, which is Gone for Good. So I read that. That's Ellery Hathaway. And she is a woman who was a Boston detective who had left the force because of a tragedy, but she's pulled back into cases because she owed somebody a favor. In all of these books that you see here, No Mercy, All the Best Lies, as I showed you earlier, Vanishing Season, take my word for it, where is it? Vanishing Season, No Mercy, All the Best Lies, Every Waking Hour, Last Seen Alive, were all part of that series, which is now complete. Then she moved on to a new protagonist, and that new protagonist is in Gone for Good. And let's see who that girl is. Where is Gone for Good? I thought I could use Goodreads to help me out here, but it wants to be stubborn. Okay, we're going to look up Gone for Good. I am -1 book in my count for 2022. Detective Annalise Vega is the detective in this one. I am off 1 book, and now I might have found the book. I've been trying to match up my spreadsheet with Goodreads. My spreadsheet says 453 books read, not counting the one I finished this morning. And Goodreads has 452, so I just found out this is missing. So thankfully, I found that missing book. Anyway, back to where we are. We are going to talk about the books that I read between, before, and after the Ellery Hathaway series. And the next one I read was A New Home. I don't know why this is not... Okay, there we go. I'm saying, why is it not in order? The New Home is a standalone book by Chris Merritt. It's a psychological thriller about a woman who her name is Freya, and she hopes that her new neighbor Emily will be her best friend, or at least her good friend. But she notices something very strange with Emily and her husband. Now, Freya and her partner, they're not married yet. They buy a flat, and they're on the first floor, and on the second floor they have these neighbors. And the first thing is the neighbors are always fighting, and the second thing is there's always furniture being dragged around at all hours of the day and night. So what Freya tries to do is she tries to befriend Emily, the wife that lives upstairs, with hopes of finding out what's going on, and if Emily needs any help, how to help her. That's what The New Home was about. Then the next book I read was A Lesson in Murder, which is by Verity Bright. I love this series, and this, I believe, is the 7th book in the Verity Bright series. And, Verity Bright is the author, the Lady Eleanor Swift series. Now, one thing Bookouture does is it allows each book to be read as a standalone. So even though this is book number 7, you don't have to read the first 6 books, and I'm speaking of this book right here. However, I am a series fanatic, and I always read every connected book whenever that is possible. So therefore, I have read all the previous books in the Lady Eleanor Swift books. Now, a little bit about Eleanor is she was a world traveler, and then her uncle died, and he left her his house. And by so doing, she has to take on her appropriate role as a lady with responsibilities. And she does have a she works, I think Clifford is Clifford in this book. I don't know if I want to say Clifford. Yes, Clifford is her butler. I just had to double check that. And she has a little dog named Gladstone. And she keeps finding herself in these situations where she's acting pretty much like an amateur detective. Well, A Lesson in Murder is starts off, the premise is she's going to speak at the girls' school where she once was a student. And it's like speech day. I think it's called speech day. And her job is to talk to these young girls and to encourage them for whatever they do, whatever endeavors they have in life. However, her favorite teacher is found dead. And so now Eleanor is acting as, again, an amateur detective to find out why that teacher died and whether or not it was foul play. And so she takes on the role of that teacher as a temporary or substitute teacher, and also as kind of like a house mother to these little girls while she's solving the murder. The next book I read was The Trapped Wife, which was, and again, I'm doing this differently than I usually do in my videos, so therefore you're seeing me go to Goodreads. And by the way, probably 95% of these book reviews are already written. The Trapped Wife is a standalone psychological thriller by Samantha Hayes, and it's about a woman named Jen Miller who's a physician, and now she's a widow with a teenage son. What's the catch? The catch is she's pregnant. Well, that's not so shocking. She's a widow. However, she is not pregnant by her husband that previously died, because they were not intimate in the last months of their marriage. There's one more layer to this. She doesn't know who the father is. And then, as she starts to try to figure out who the father is, somebody comes into her life, forces his way into her life, literally, like, almost like, you know, like if somebody knocks on your door and you don't want to let them in, you try to close the door and they stick their foot in the door. I don't know if you heard me stomp my foot. They stick their foot in the door so you can't close the door on them. I've never had to do that, but let's just picture it. Well, that's kind of figuratively how I saw this when I was reading this book, because the character, and I do not name the character in my book review because I don't want to do a spoiler. I didn't want to do a spoiler in the review, and I don't want to do a spoiler now, but somebody kind of sticks his foot in the door of her life. Interesting book. I highly suggest it. It's The Trapped Wife. Then I read The Couple Upstairs, which is a lot like The New Home. Now, The Couple Upstairs is by Shalini Boland. I love her stuff. And did I mix up the plots? Let's see if I did. I'm hoping I didn't. I don't really think I did. Okay, I'm sorry. In this case, is the loud, rowdy neighbors, and she tries to befriend them. These books are very similar in the plot. But Shalini Boland's book, which I gave 5 stars to, is the one where she wants to right the wrongs of the neighbor upstairs. Nina and Zach are the one that move into the 2-flat. I am going to go back and correct what I said about that one in a moment. But Nina and Zach rent the 2-flat. They have neighbors upstairs that are fighting. Vanessa, the wife, is pregnant. She's fighting with her partner, which I think his name is Chris. And Nina is sure something is wrong. Zach is like, no, leave it alone. It's nothing to do with us, and so forth and so on. And so that's The Couple Upstairs. Let's go back to The New Home, because I gave you guys the wrong premise, and I don't want to leave it at that. In The New Home, we have, it's a very, very similar situation, because, kind of similar. This couple, the husband is a cardiologist, and he gets a new job, and they move into a new home. The wife, the neighbor in this case, her name is Emily, and the wife in this case, Freya, is excited to have moved into the new home, but she's left all of her friends behind. Well, she thinks she's going to befriend Emily, and I think Emily's partner's name, I don't think his name was Jack, but anyway, she finds out that he's not very friendly, the neighbor's husband. And then later, Emily and the 4-year-old daughter turn up missing. So that's the mystery here. I'm sorry for mixing up these 2 books. Forgive me for that. We talked about the detective Anna Lisa Vega series, Gone for Good Briefly by Joanna Schaffhausen, when I talked about these other books by her. So that was the first book in a new series. This was not a review title. I got this from my library because I'm hoping that the next Joanna Schaffhausen book that shows up on NetGalley I can get for review, and I wanted the history of having read the first book in the series. So that's what that is. Then I read Becoming Wild, which is the second book in, I'm pretty sure will be a trilogy, and it's the Alex Wild series. Now this book takes place in more than one country. It looks like, it says I haven't written the review, but I'm positive I did, but for some weird reason I don't have it on NetGalley, so we are going to blog this and bring it up on my blog, because I am positive I wrote this review and published this review. So bear with me. Oops, if I could spell it properly, I could bring it up. Yes, I published this on September 13th, so I have, or was that the Blitz? Maybe I haven't published the review. Okay, so in this case we have doctors who are traveling, like Ethiopia and another country. But anyway, they're traveling, and they meet and they fall in love, and she thinks she might have her happily ever after, but the book turns into a mystery because something happens to the man that the doctor, or not the doctor, she's the doctor, he's a millionaire or a billionaire. Well, he disappears, and now she's searching for him, and that's pretty much how this book ends, and there will be a third book. I don't know when it's coming out, and like I said, I'm fairly positive that it's a trilogy and that there's probably just going to be one more book, but when it comes out I will most definitely be reading it. The next book I read, and this video is going long because I read a lot of books, was The Bookbinder's Daughter. Now, this was really a surprise for me because it was a paranormal, which I do not usually read paranormals. And it was about a woman whose mother was a bookbinder, and her mother died, which, according to the woman, was kind of under suspicious circumstances. So she takes a job as a bookbinder. But the thing about this young woman, and her name was Sophie, is she had, what's the word? I do have to cheat. What is the word? Dyslexia. She was sorry, hit the camera. She was dyslexic, so she couldn't read the most basic things with ease, but she finds an old book in this library, where she was working, and she could read the text. That's what started off something that turned into a paranormal. But it was a really, really, really good book, and it had a lot of interesting things in it, things that I don't ordinarily read about. I'm going to take a sip of coffee. And that's The Bookbinder's Daughter by Jessica Thorne, and I will read more Jessica Thorne in the future because I absolutely love that book. Now we're moving on to the 10th of September, and the next book I read was The Girl at My Door, and this was by Rebecca Griffiths. Now, The Girl at My Door was a crime thriller, which was pretty much like a true crime because it was based on real life serial killer. I want to say his name, and he was John Reginald Christie. Now, when I started reading this book, I stopped and I did search to see who John Christie was. And yes, in the 1940s, in London, 1949, he was a serial killer who was eventually hung in 1953. Well, in this book, The Girl at My Door, you have two people. You have Queenie and you have Joy, who both are best friends, but Joy becomes engaged to a wealthy bachelor named Charles Gilchrist. Well, Queenie had a fondness for Charles, commits sin of betrayal, which totally derailed her friendship with Joy. And so that's that drama taking place. But at that same time, John Reginald Christie, the serial killer, had marked his next victims. Who had Christie marked? So you're reading Queenie and Joy's story, then you're reading Christie's eerie marking of his victims, and then you even read about Queenie's best friend and what he was going through at that time. So it was kind of like 3 stories in one. I should put the number 3. So you have all those stories and they interconnected. Really, really good story. I gave it 4 stars. I really liked it. And then the next book I read was Serve and Protect, and I'm hoping that I'm bringing this stuff up in order. And this was by T.O. Fallon, and it was, I think, the 3rd book in a series, and no, the 5th book in the Federal K9 series. Now, I generally try to read series in order, but a lot of times if I'm going to read a contemporary romance, I don't actually worry too much about reading it in order, because with contemporary romances, they usually stand well on their own, and that's exactly what Serve and Protect did. I loved it. I gave it 4 stars, and it's basically about a woman named Cassidy Morgan who wakes up to hear a dog barking at her door. She follows the dog and she finds a man unconscious on the floor. She goes to save his life, and she wants to call an ambulance, and he's barely conscious, but he tells her no ambulance. Turns out that he's a marshal and he's undercover, and they fall in love while he is trying to find out who killed his partner. And I said he was a marshal. He was a Secret Service agent. Then the next book, which was one of my favorite books for September, was The Sweetest Remedy by Jane Igharo, and this was a really nice story, and I don't know if it was my 2nd book by her or not. I'm talking about this one right here. But in this particular book, we have Hannah Bailey, who she kind of knew her father a wee bit. She met him when she was 8 years old, but she was born with a white mother. But people would always come up to her, "What are you? What are you?" Because she had a Nigerian father, so she looked different. So fast forward, she's in her 20s. She's at a cocktail party. She meets somebody named Lawrence. They hit it off, but they both get a phone call. Her phone call says, "Your father has died in Nigeria and you have to be there for the reading of his will." Lawrence gets a phone call, and we'll talk about Lawrence in a second. So why does Hannah get this phone call? Who does she meet? Well, she meets her 2 half-siblings, her 2 half-sisters, and her half-brother, and also their mother and their uncle. Well, not really their uncle, but the family lawyer. And then they also have Lawrence, who she met at the cocktail party. Well, what was his role? So that was a great, great story. I loved it. I want to read more of Jane Igharo when I can. And then we move on to On Location, and this was by Sarah Smith. Now, I had a little trouble finding this book because in here it says Sarah Ekavar Smith, but then she dropped Ekavar and now it's just Sarah Smith. Well, in any event, here we have an Enemies to Lovers story where Leah Dunn gets a job as a producer, but she runs into problems with one of the stars of the show she's producing. And that's that little story there. I loved it, actually. It looks like I gave it 5 stars. So that is On Location, an Enemies to Lovers story. Then I read The Heart Principle by Helen Hong. Now, it's the 3rd book in a series. I did not read the first 2 books, and I only read this book because she was a featured author in one of the challenges that I do. There was nothing wrong with it. I did enjoy it. It's just, well, let me tell you a little bit about it. The author is on the spectrum, Asperger's, I believe. The character, what I liked about the character, she was leading a normal life, but she finds out, she's a violinist named Anna Sun. I wasn't going to talk about it, but I will. Well, she finds out her therapist thinks that she's on the spectrum. She gets mixed reactions from her mother and from her friends. And this changes her life. It looks like I haven't yet written a review for this, but it was a good book. Like I said, it was the third book in the series. By the way, is the Kiss Quotient series. Kiss Quotient is the first book, and The Bride Test was the second book. But like I said, I hadn't read either of those. Then we're moving into what would be the third week, right? Because we counted this as week 1. This is as week 2, and this would be week 3. You see I'm reading quite a few books, so this video is going so long. So the third book I read was, I needed a YA book or something, so I chose Amina's Voice, which was by Hina Khan, and it was a young adult book, and it was such a nice story about a Pakistani American Muslim girl who was finding her way. Did she fit in with her peers? Did she fit in with her family? Which side of her family? Her Pakistani family or her American Muslim family? A very, very good coming of age story. I loved it. And then I moved on to, I believe, the 10th book in Patricia Gibney's, goodness gracious, I want to call her name, Lottie Parker. Oh my goodness, I love this series. Now, Little Bones, like I said, it's the 10th book. Yes, you can read these books as standalones if you want, but I like the history, I like the connectivity, and I have read all but the first 2 books. I believe I only read the books number 3 through 10. And so in this book here, Lottie has a serious case, but while she has this case, she's kind of running into some problems with her relationship with Boyd, Detective Boyd. So the story is mostly on the case that Lottie is working, but also on the drama in her personal life and what's going on with him. Then we moved on to Dear Evan Hansen. Now, I read this book because I was watching America's Got Talent, which I don't think I finished this season. But anyway, I was watching America's Got Talent, and a performer did a song for that. I fell in love with the song, and therefore I looked up the movie and found out that it was a book. The movie is out now. I'm hoping that I can somehow see it. But I read Dear Evan Hansen, and it's about a young man whose classmate had, the boy Evan, his therapist had him write letters to himself as a way to help him to learn to communicate better. Well, in the midst of this boy Evan getting therapy, a fellow student had died, and it became assumed that Evan was the student's best friend, and it's what Evan went through as the school and other classmates are dealing with, and the boy's family were dealing with the suicide of that teenager. Then I read Dead Mercy, which was the 5th book. Oh, goodness gracious. I love this series by Noelle Houghton. It's the 5th book in the DC Maggie Jameson series. Yes, I read all the other books, which were Dead Inside, Dead Wrong, Dead Perfect, and Dead Secret. Now, Dead Mercy won't be out until November 19th, but of course, once that book showed up on my radar, I stopped everything and I read it. In this book here, we have her trying to get to the bottom of a killer that leads to something that happened in the past, and whether or not Maggie can work on the case at hand and also solve things from the past, all while dealing with some issues in her personal life, and that involves a journalist named Julie who comes into the scene. And also we have Kate, who was Maggie's friend, who went through some trauma in previous books, and she's back. She's a psychologist, like a criminal psychologist, and so it was really, really a good story. I loved it. Like I said, it'll be out in November. Then I read another early book, and this is by Lori Foster, which is Watching Over You. And this is Mackenzie's of Ridge Trail #3. This book won't be out till December 28th. Let's see, I'm right here. This book will be out December 28th. But again, it's one of those books, one of those authors. As a matter of fact, she is my favorite author. A book of hers comes up, boom, I'm going to read it right away, which is what I did. And now the Mackenzie family is a family that champions the rights of women, especially women that are involved in white slavery, and the family is exposing these organizations and getting rid of them as fast as they crop up. Well, in this case, the first two books, the older brothers had their books, but in this book, the younger sister, her name is, what is this young girl's name? Madison, has her story. Now, in the previous book, Madison ran into somebody named Detective Crosby Albertson, who broke down one of these organizations, and she fell for Crosby, but he shot her down. Well, now Crosby has been hired by her father, and so we have her love story. I loved it. I loved it. One of my favorite books of last month. The next book I read, okay, I've got to refresh this page, was Joanne Ross's The Inheritance. Now, this is about three sisters who were all by different mothers, and their father dies, and now these women have to deal with the vineyard that was left to them and what would happen with the vineyard. But it was also a historical fiction because they meet their paternal grandmother, and she tells them her history in World War II. So that was The Inheritance, an excellent, excellent book. I absolutely loved it. I gave this one, I think I gave it 4 or 5 stars. I don't quite remember. And then I read a book by Toni Anderson. It's The Cold Justice Negotiators #5. I did read the all of the other books in the series. I guess I'll tell you the names of them since I'm telling you the names of some of the other books in series. They are Cold and Deadly, Colder Than Sin, Cold Wicked Lies, and Cold Cruel Kiss. Well, in this particular story, we have Darby O'Rourke, who wakes up on a couch, doesn't know where she is, and as she recognizes her surroundings, she realizes that she's in the house of one of her workmates, or one of her fellow students, and she's a student, one of her fellow classmates, I should say, and he's dead. And she is first accused of the murder, but then she's protected by supervisory special agent of the FBI, Agent Eben Winters, because somebody is after her. So that was a really fast-paced mystery thriller, I guess, romantic suspense, I'm trying to say. Really, really good story. I loved it. And then I'm going to move right on, because this video is going so long, to Mistletoe at Moonstone Lake by Holly Martin. This is the Jewel Island #5. I did read every single book in this series. I love this series. I love anything Holly Martin writes. And for reference, they are Sunrise on Sapphire Bay, Autumn Skies at Ruby Falls, Ice Creams on Emerald Cove, and Sunlight over Crystal Sands. Yes, it will work as a standalone, but if you like the continuity like I do, you will love reading the entire series just as I did. Then I moved on to Cold Case Takedown, and this was a love-inspired suspense. As a matter of fact, the one I read right after that, these are both by Jessica Patch. This was Cold Case Double Cross. These were love-inspired suspense. So while these romantic suspense novels were taking place, the protagonist would reference their faith. So I don't know that I've read any love-inspired suspense prior to these, but they were very good. Then I moved on to Second Chance to Wear His Ring, and this is a couple who they grew up together, and he became a billionaire in the U.S., and she gets hurt and has amnesia, so his mother lets him know, and he comes back to see what he can do, if he can help the girl in any way. But the problem is that he's in love with her and she rejected him. Well, now they have an affinity for one another, but with her amnesia, she doesn't remember rejecting him. Does she take his offer for marriage again? And that's what that one's about. Then we have 1 week to claim it all. And in this one here, we have a young couple. This was a Harlequin Desire. I haven't read one of these in years, but in this particular story, which I wish it would come up, this is by Adriana Herrera. And this here is about a woman who could inherit her father's empire at the Sembrano Studios. And I think I read the previous books. Yeah, because Just for the Holidays, I read, this was the first book in it, and then the next one was the second book. I think I just had Just for the Holidays for review, but I went back and I read this one because, like, I love the continuity. But anyway, there was this Hispanic type of very, very successful studios, and in this particular book, a girl could become the CEO after her father died, but she's got to deal with someone who thinks he should get the job, as well as her father's family. And then in Just for the Holidays, we have another member of that family and what happens in that love story. So these are both connected. I don't think you have to read both of them, but of course I did. And then I moved on to, I can't read this one, Christmas, why can't I read that? White on White is a little hard for me to read, but Christmas Miracle in Jamaica. And this was the first book in a series where neurologist Chloe Bailey and surgeon Sam Powell find each other again. What is a Christmas miracle? Well, she finds out she's pregnant when she shouldn't have been able to get pregnant. And what does Sam Powell have to do with it? I'm going to move on because this is going so long. Then we have The Daughter's Mistake by Kate Hewitt. And this is about a young girl who, her name is Maddie. She hit a little girl named Amy Rose with her car. What happens? Something was going on with Maddie, all while Amy Rose was recovering from this tragic car accident. Then we move on to Find Me at Whisper Falls, and let's see, I don't know where that is. Find Me at Whisper Falls was by Ellen Oaksmith. That review, I think, just went up on my blog today. And in that case, we have Freya Johansson, who almost gets a job as a veterinarian. I never say that word right. And it's her first job. She's just out of vet school, but her job is she's competing with another student. And while they were in school, he betrayed her, but now it's a matter of who gets the job. It's a 2-year contract, and it turns into a love story. Then I read Murder at the Wedding, and Murder at the Wedding, I think it's the 6th or 7th book. We'll tell you in 1 minute. Murder at the Wedding was the 7th book, and it was the Miss Underhay series. Kitty Underhay, it's in 1934. She's an independent woman. As a matter of fact, her mother owns a hotel, and she helps her mother out. But in this particular book, she's going to a wedding to serve as a bridesmaid. But at this as she is going to do her job as a bridesmaid, there's a murder. She is an amateur sleuth, and she goes ahead and works on trying to find out who killed the person that died at that wedding. Then I read Mother's Helper by Julia Crouch. Now, in this particular book, this woman is pregnant, and she wants to hire somebody that will help her with her child. Why does a single woman need a mother's helper? Well, she has a particular health issue that would make her inadequate just to raise her child by herself. Well, in this book, a woman who gets the job is perfect for the job. But why is she perfect for the job? Well, there's something sinister about it, and that's what this is, a psychological thriller, Her Mother's Helper by Julia Crouch. The next book I read was by Dana Perry. I read 2 books by Dana Perry, Her Ocean Grave and Silent Island. Now, I had Silent Island for review, but I went back and I read the first book in the series. They're both good series. They're about Detective Abby Pierce. Abby was a New York homicide cop, but now she returns home to Martha's Vineyard to take she's the only detective at that particular police force, and what's happening on the vineyard that keeps her busy. And that's what those two books are about. Then I read The Silent Mother by Liz Lawler. And in this particular book, this woman, a doctor, her son, who was also a doctor, supposedly killed himself. And she's trying to find out why. And what she has is his journal, his diary entries. And she takes his apartment, which was a flat, and she also takes a job at the hospital where he was in order to try to figure out what happened to her son. Then we move on to My Best Friend's Wedding by Tilly Tennant. I love this one. She was about to get married. That imploded because her fiance was sleeping with her cousin. But now it's 6 months later and her best friend's about to marry. And she's like, oh, do you have to invite him? He's my +1. But she's like, it'd be poor etiquette not to invite him. So how will this young girl named Libby deal with seeing her ex at the wedding? But meanwhile, when she's looking across, trying to avoid her ex's eye, she catches somebody's eye. Love at first sight. What happens there? Then I read a very sweet story by Jenny Hale, which was A Lighthouse Christmas. I love Jenny Hale's books. Anything she writes, I absolutely love. This was a great, great book. It was very, very sweet. It was about a woman named Mia who is trying to restore a lighthouse that belonged to her grandparents. But in restoring the lighthouse, she's trying to restore it so that they can sell it. Will the family lose its legacy when the lighthouse goes for sale? Then I remember I had mentioned that I read another Ellie Midwood book, which was a reprint of a previous book. Well, I also read by Ellie Midwood, The Girl on the Platform, which was a new book. And in this book, we have a girl who lost her whole family. Her name was Libby Schultz Boysen, and it was based on her true story about a young German girl who meets Harold, and they fall in love. But because of Hitler's regime, the trauma and the drama they experienced was so, so sad. And now what happens in this case? It's my second Ellie Midwood book. It should be one of my favorite books for this month. Then I read a nice little story, which was A Rake Like You, where a young woman she is about to date someone. She's interested in someone, but he has the reputation for being a rake. Will he be the man that she expects him to be, especially now that he finds himself in debt? He needs to marry, and her name is Louisa Strickland, and she's not so sure that she can trust that he's changed his ways. That's A Rake Like You. I loved it. I love historical romance anyway. We're getting close to the end of the month because we're not going to go here. We're just going to go up to here. Then I read The Mother's Fault, and this was by Nicole Trope. I love her books. Always, always love her books. I have not yet written this review. I've got to hurry up and get it written. But this is basically about a woman whose little boy named Riley ends up missing, and she's trying to figure out what to tell Riley because there's a secret she has, and she's kept this secret from her son, and will the secret come back to haunt her? Then I finished Les Miserables. Now, I started this in August. We were supposed to read it during August, and I read it with a group called Doorstoppers Are Us, but we decided to carry it into September. So I finally finished it on the 28th of September. I loved it, and then I watched the movie with Hugh Jackman. The movie broke me, okay? It broke me. Then I read Love, Comment, Subscribe. I loved this one. This was by Kathy Yardley, and it was the Ponto Beach Reunion book #1, and it was about Lily Wang and Toby Bowie. They were both Instagram and YouTube influencers, and both of their channels were getting millions of hits, but things get a little bit stagnant in the world of social media. So they collaborate, and so as they collaborate and they come together to boost the numbers on their channel, they start to realize that they like each other, but their job is right now to make collaboration videos, and what happens in that case. Then I read not a trilogy, an anthology, and this was by 3 authors. It was called Kissing Under the Mistletoe, and it was by Susan Enoch, Amelia Gray, and Anna Bennett. I've read books by Suzanne Enoch and Amelia Gray before, but I'm not so sure that I've read anything by Anna Bennett yet. But it was a nice little story, 3 books, Great Scott, Christmas at Dewberry Hollow, and My Mistletoe Bow. Loved all 3 of them. They were all very, very quick, novellas. They were maybe 100 pages or so each. The next book I read was by Laura Lee, Her Renegade Cowboy. This was my only book I did not like this month. I only gave this one 2 stars. As a matter of fact, I don't even think I reviewed it on my blog, just NetGalley and Goodreads. It was basically about he was, I think, an agent, an FBI or something. And no, he was a U.S. Marshal, and the girl in this book should have gone into witness protection based on something that happened to her when she was in college. She didn't, and now the person that she testified against has escaped, so he's on the job to try to protect her. They fall in love, get hot and heavy like 1,001 times, so I only gave it 2 stars. Then, and I kind of rushed through that book. It wasn't my favorite. Then I read A Reckless Match by Kate Bateman, which was my 2nd or 3rd historical romance book in August. And this was the first book in the Ruthless Rival series. And this one was about 2 feuding families and how a couple could get together. Her name was Maddie, his name was Griff. And how could they even fall in love when their fathers were feuding? I have not yet written that review, but I did enjoy that story. Then I read The Hiding Place by Helen Pfeiffer. If I could read my by Helen Pfeiffer, because I had First Girl to Die, but I did not want to read First Girl to Die without reading the previous book, because I read the first book, which was One Left Alive, and then I had First Girl to Die, but I had read them out of order, so I went back and read The Hiding Place. And so in The Hiding Place we have a little girl that goes missing, and we have Detective Morgan Brooks, who tries to find out why this girl went missing and what happens when another little girl goes missing. And then I read First Girl to Die, which was the 4th book in the series. Again, Detective Morgan Brooks. And in this case, she's called to the case when a teacher apparently kills herself, and Morgan begins to find out why certain people are acting out of sorts, including the woman that killed herself. And that brings us to almost 1 hour. Anybody that lasted this long in this video, I want to thank you. But again, I'm trying something for the first time, which is by going through my planner and telling you what I've read. And let's give you the summary for this month, which was 55 books. The pages I read for September was 18,364. That brought me up at the end of September to 149,212. Okay, yeah, that's October. 149,212. That gave me an average of 612 pages per day at 334 pages per book. For NetGalley, I read 46 books. Reviews for NetGalley, I did 25, and for my blog, I did 41. That's it. I hope that you stuck with me, and I will put it in my description that this video is going to run long, but I thank you very much for your attention to this video, and I'll be back with more. Bye-bye.